Everyone thinks that the only way to make money in the AI semiconductor boom is to buy the sexy chip designer like Nvidia or the semiconductor manufacturing companies that manufacture these chips. During any gold rush, the guys who make the most reliable money aren't really the gold prospectors, but the guys who supply them picks and shovels. So to build a semiconductor microchip, you need a manufacturing clean room that's 10,000 times cleaner than your surgical operating theater. So you need to pipe a lot of utilities into that manufacturing flawlessly. So today we're going to open chapter 10 of my book, The Malaysian Multi-Baggers, and I'll show you how to find these picks and shovel guys that actually supply the semiconductor ecosystem, or a template to find these guys anywhere in any other industry. Stay till the end of the video to find out more. Hi everyone and welcome back to the channel. My name is John, former engineer turned full-time investor, currently wealth planning director at Phillip Capital and Phillip Wealth, and the author of the book Malaysian Multi-Baggers. So today we're going to open chapter 10 of the book I authored, and we're going to cover the Malaysian industrial sector and industry, because I feel that this is the unsung hero that helps propel any semiconductor player that they actually add value to in Japan, in Europe, in China, and even in Malaysia. If materials were raw ingredients, then the industrial sector is the machinery for growth, because they transform raw materials into equipment and infrastructure that power everything else. In Malaysia, there's this sector has actually evolved into services as well as building what we call utility systems for other manufacturers to actually add value to the industry. So the focus for chapter 10 is actually this niche or this subsector called ultra high purity gas. Now, let me give you some context. Whenever you manufacture semiconductor chips, you actually need ultra high purity gas, either for cleaning or either for inerting a certain manufacturing process, and this involves engineering a gas and chemical delivery system. So are they mission critical? Absolutely, because a tiny speck of dust can actually contaminate the semiconductor microchip, and that's it. The entire chip is gone. It's defected, and that's why any semiconductor manufacturing facility around the world requires it to be 10,000 times cleaner than your surgical operating theater. That's why they have rooms such as class 100, class 10,000. These are the categorizations of how clean this room will actually need to be. So how do these players actually make money? It is very much project based, and an ultra high purity gas service provider or contractor will actually engineer, procure, construct, and commission these systems for wafer fab, usually a wafer fab manufacturing plant. The formula is pretty simple. It's revenue equals to project value multiplied by execution margin, and the execution margin really depends on how well they manage the construction risks and engineering risks when they deliver this project. Project size can range anywhere between 10 million to over a billion ringgit, and a lot of these the materials to actually construct this kind of systems contain what we call exotic material, like a special grade of stainless steel, and they make up a very big chunk of the cost, which can eat up probably 40 to 50%, 60%, sometimes 60% of the cost. The other big cost is actually highly skilled labor, because you don't get any Tom, Dick, and Harry to have a seamless weld to help you weld all these pipes together, because any contaminant within the system can actually degrade the quality of gas that is being delivered to the manufacturing process. The winning edge for companies within this space is really scale and the ability to execute, because the best firms around the world, they use modular prefabricated parts or you think of them like Lego bricks. They manufacture skids or modules, and then they assemble them at the construction site to save time, to maintain quality. Because if you weld these seams of these stainless steel tubes or pipes in a controlled facility, then you can control quality much better rather than welding it on site. Then you have a lot of contaminants around. You can't control the environment. By doing this, you actually cut installation on site time down to 30%. And with that, you actually also reduce the risk of liquidated damages that your client can actually come back to you and says, hey, there's defect in your system and all these kind of things, right? The industrial, so the company, one example of a company that plays in this space is actually Kelington Group. And a big chunk of their revenue still comes from EPCC, which is the Engineering, Procurement, Construction Commission. However, they have been very vigilant, and they have very smartly pivoted into what we call an industrial gas unit. Because EPCC type contracts are very lumpy, you have to continuously bid, you have to continuously tender, and then once you win, then it comes as part of your order book. But then it's not very sustainable if wafer fab plants slow down in terms of new build-outs, then that revenue will actually suffer. So they pivoted into what they knew best, because the two founders of Kelington Group, the company in Chapter 10, were actually from Malaysian Oxygen, and they know the industrial gas business very, very well. So they, whatever excess earnings that they had doing EPCC, they actually started building out what we call industrial gas plants or units. And how the unit economics here work is that, let's just say you need CO2 gas, or you need nitrogen gas, or you need oxygen for a hospital. And the hospital doesn't want to maintain a facility, doesn't want to come out of the capex. They'll say, okay, here you go, Kelington, can you build this for me? I will pay you a certain contract value to build it, and I will also pay you a certain minimum order quantity for the gas that I will take, because it's so mission critical. And a good example of uses of these industrial gas plants are actually in the food and beverage. Now imagine if you need carbonated drinks, to manufacture carbonated drinks, and that's where you have the need for CO2. And Kelington will come and say, okay, we'll build this plant for you. There's a certain minimal take rate that you have to pay us. And usually the formula is monthly contract revenue will equal a fixed facility fee. You pay an X amount in fixed facility, and then you add on the volume that you're going to take. Are you going to take like 1,000 cubic feet of gas, or 10,000 meter cube of gas at a certain time frame? And you multiply that against the commodity price of that particular gas, right? Usually, this kind of contracts usually last anywhere between 10 to 15 years, and the structure of the contract is usually called take or pay. And most why they need to structure it that way is to safeguard the capex cost that someone like Kelington will have to fork out upfront. And it actually protects their downside risk, because they cannot be saying that, oh, okay, I constructed you to build this, and then 3 years later pull the plug, where Kelington has not even recouped their capex costs. So yeah, clients like this is because they get the contractor, the builder, plus an operator, because with Kelington taking this rental fee, for the lack of a better word, they actually will have to upkeep and maintain these facilities on behalf of the client. So that coupled with EPCC gives Kelington almost like, okay, your growth comes a lot from EPCC contracts, getting bigger and bigger UHP contracts overseas, but at the same time, you have a very stable base of industrial gas supply, which kind of gives you that kind of recurring revenue going forward. I'll just dive a little bit into the history of Kelington Group, because I really admire the founder and his team, his co-founder. It was started, Kelington Group was actually started by Gan Hong Keng in 1999, an engineer who mastered the design of gas delivery systems. He really expanded into China in 2011. I think he knew he couldn't go straight to TSMC. I mean, TSMC will look at him and then, who are you, right? Have you delivered gas delivery systems for me? And he went into China. They needed help to grow the semicon industry, and I think he benefited by being with his client, grew with his client, and he secured massive contracts there, built out his capability, built out his team's capability. And today, they're one of the most preferred players around the world to deliver ultra-high purity gas systems. KGB systems achieve this thing called a 6N purity, which is 99.9999. So that's 4 nines after the decimal place. That's why it's 6N, 6 in a way 6 decimal points, right? Purity, making them the most trusted partner today, even for giants like TSMC, Samsung, Infineon, Micron. Yeah, you name it, right? And today their order book is just staggering. It's 2.5 billion. I think the tender book's roughly about 5 billion. So there's kind of like a 50% win rate. Obviously, I can't put words into IR Raymond's mouth to say that they have a 50% win rate, but the track record seems to show that. So whenever they tender, yeah, kind of win half, which is pretty amazing, because if you look at the construction industry, usually people tender and the win rate is anywhere between 10 to 20%. Even if you can win 20%, you're considered like almost like a demigod already, right? So yeah, I think the resiliency of I think two things drive the semiconductor industry, and in a way drives this niche, this service provider, is that AI is creating an insatiable demand for semiconductor chips. And this is, while the semiconductor or electronics industry is very cyclical, I think key to understanding this is almost all the new revolution that has happened over the past 20 years. Okay, think about it. 2G, 2.5G, 3G, and then 4G. That was the telecommunications boom that brought, on smartphones, that brought up the semiconductor up to one very big cycle. That has actually tapered off, because from 5G to 6G, right now we have no killer app or killer like the iPhone. We need that kind of killer application or killer device to take that niche into the next cycle. But then it's replaced, before AI was actually by the automotive industry. I don't know if you realize that the automotive sector actually had a massive jump in electronic components within the car. Before even EV, you look at your MyV and you see so many electronics. So that was the second wave. And that kind of tapered off after COVID. But the third wave now is really AI, right? So what's next? I mean, the progression of man and creating objects or devices or equipment that's smarter and smarter will demand more semiconductor chips. And this is where the tailwinds are created for service players like Kelington to actually ride on. So let me know what you think, guys. Do you think that the semiconductor industry is ripe for another depression? Or do you think that there's still more tailwind in this industry that other players can actually benefit? I look forward to seeing you in the next video. We've kind of completed the Malaysian multi-bagger series, and if you haven't seen the previous chapters and the videos on them, check out the other videos on this channel. See you in the next video.